Well, hello and welcome to the Client Catching Podcast. Now, did you realize that right now your sales opportunity cost, it's almost certainly your fastest route to increasing cash flow? Now, you might be thinking, Adam, what on earth do you mean by that? Well, let me ask you if this sounds familiar. You meet an ideal potential client, let's say it's at a networking event, and you hit it off instantly, and that person says, oh, look, I've been really looking for somebody like you to help me out. We should talk. And you think, brilliant, a new client. But what tends to happen is this is usually where it goes wrong, because you swap business cards, you say you're going to get in touch, but then you get back to the office and you just hit with a load of stuff that you just didn't get done while you were out of the office, and you get busy and therefore you forget to follow up. Then after a couple of weeks, you're going through your trousers and you find that business card in your pocket and you think, oh crap, I was meant to follow up with that guy. So what happens? You quickly send a groveling email saying, please excuse the forgetfulness, but surprise, surprise, you get nothing. You get silence. And then you forget again because that's what happens, isn't it? And after a couple of weeks, you bump into them at another networking event and you're only there to find out that they went with somebody else who they met at the same event that you first met them at, except that person remembered to follow up. Now, that is how this follow-up failure leaves a lot of money on the table. And it's exactly what I mean by your sales opportunity cost. So how can you fix this and ensure that you never miss a follow-up again? Well, that's exactly what my guest today is going to show you how to do. He is the co-founder and CEO of Salesflare, an intelligent CRM built for SMBs selling to the B2B market, which pulls customer data together automatically and then actively helps you to follow up. And like so many of the best solutions that I see out there, this was created to solve their own problem. They hated having to essentially manually track leads, and they wanted an easier way to follow up, which basically led them to build Salesflare. And just to see the value of not just this software, but of actually, of following up in general. Some of his clients are making well in excess of $1 million more per year by doing nothing more than simply following up in a more efficient way. Now, how is that for an opportunity cost for you? So it's why I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my guest today on the Client Catching Podcast, Jeroen Corthout. Hello, Jeroen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. And I'm not sure if I know we practiced your name at the beginning, and did I get it right? I have a tendency to butcher the names.
No, you had it right earlier, but you were going a bit fast now. It's more like Jeroen Corthout, at least with an English accent.
Jeroen Corthout. Okay. So yes, tell the listeners where your accent hails from first of all.
My accent is I speak Dutch as a mother tongue, but I'm not Dutch as in from the Netherlands. I'm from Belgium, from Flanders, from the Dutch-speaking version. I live in Antwerp, Belgium.
Antwerp. Cool. So how does somebody from Belgium get into CRMs and follow up and helping people solve what's really a huge problem in business? And I think we discussed it before before we started recording a little while ago. And follow-up failure is a virus that can kill your business. So what kind of got you into this? I mean, I kind of alluded to it, but why don't you give us a bit of a background?
The long background or the short background?
Well, I mean, we've got roughly 45 minutes for this, so it depends on how long you want to go.
Okay. Well, let's say that my very first CRM that I used was Salesforce. I was working as an account manager at a marketing consultancy, and we were big Salesforce fans in the company. We would deploy it at pharma companies because we mainly helped pharma companies, and we would then build the whole campaign around it, like all the marketing and sales data and all get to one place, which was super interesting for reporting and all. We also used it internally. And as it was my very first CRM, I tried to take it very seriously and try to really use it what it was meant to be used for. So I started logging everything, the companies and then the contacts and what I then did with these contacts, the opportunities. I tried to put in tasks in there, but I didn't do that for a very long time, at least not everything else than, let's say, contacts and opportunities. Contacts were good to put on the newsletter list, and opportunities so that management knew exactly what we were selling where. but all the rest didn't really work that easily. I was quickly going back to organizing my emails and all that, and my calendar in Outlook, my tasks in Wunderlist. These systems were just much more practical for this kind of purpose, and there didn't seem like a whole lot of integration either. I was just duplicating information in Salesforce, let's say, in a way that seemed yeah, like an enormous amount of work, not giving me much back. I mean, the things I had to do, I did them, but the rest, I just left after a while. So fast forward about 4 years, my co-founder and I, we had a bunch of leads for another software company. And we looked for a good way to follow these people up. And we looked at different CRMs, and we understood that most of them are really not very practical sales follow-up tools. It seemed like a lot of putting stuff in a database without getting much back. We started building our own simple system in a sheet, but still that we didn't really manage to fill out properly, which means that we forgot to follow up at the right times, that we followed up twice or stupid things like that, and that we forgot what was actually discussed, and then we had to go look in our emails to find that back. It all seems like something weird. And then we figured that actually all of the things that we were doing, we were actually duplicating information. So the fact that we emailed someone on Tuesday, that is in our email system, we were often found ourselves copying email signatures to get the phone numbers and all those kind of things. So that was also in our emails. Actually, a lot of contact information there. Then meetings were in our calendar, calls were in our phone. We tried to work with email open and click tracking as well, and linked website tracking, but that was also in another place. And in front of us, we saw a system that would actually connect to all these places, get the information, sort of offer it to us, and then we could easily curate it in a way that it would help us to keep track of the information, and as a result of that also help us to follow up with the leads, because we would have all the information to do that. Now over time we've grown the system also to actively help with that follow-up, because as soon as you have the data and you know when the last contact was, you know in what stage an opportunity is and all that, you can, for instance, say, okay, it's been 5 days in proposal made and nothing has happened. Maybe we should follow up again, and we trigger a suggested task, as we call it, to the salesperson to do that follow-up, or an email stays unanswered, or we have all kinds of mechanisms in the software to actively help salespeople to do the follow-up as well.
And there's a lot in that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to in terms of like the frustrations when it comes to just managing the information, and the tasks that you have to do with each of the individuals, because not everyone is going to be at the same stage. They're all going to be having different conversations, and especially if you've got a complex sale and you've got multiple different sales reps that are involved in that process and multiple decision makers and all that kind of thing, it becomes a real challenge to keep on top of everything that you've got to remember. So before we sort of go into some of the things that you've been able to help a lot of people with, I want to sort of back off a little bit and sort of think, right, when people talk about follow-up, some people may mean one thing, others will mean another. How do you define follow-up, and what are some of the things that you think people get wrong with it, first of all?
Yeah. If I would have to define follow-up, it's more than sending, hey, have you seen my last email or something? Because that's probably what you first associate with follow-up. I mean, guiding people through the sales process, through the different steps at the right times at a sort of pace that makes sense to them, and the momentum that they're having without losing their momentum either. So it's sort of a nicely paced guiding through the sales pipeline. And that means that, first of all, you need to have an idea of how that sales process or that sales pipeline looks, what are the different steps you take people through, that you need to have an idea of what is sort of the deadline that people have in mind and the timing, and how likely is the deal to die if you don't pick it up right now, if you don't jump on it and pull them through the process, and that you know very well, like to the day, when you need to follow up people to keep that cadence going, because if you start missing it, at some point people either they just lose the sense of how can I say,
It's kind of like a
so
sense of urgency involved
the
in,
sense of
or keeping
urgency.
that, yeah, it's keeping it sort of top of mind and reminding them that they inquired about solving this problem. Therefore,
Yeah,
it must still be a problem. So therefore, can we sort of help you fix it, essentially?
yeah, yeah, and it's not that it might not be a problem anymore per se, but people deal with a lot of things, and often if they don't stay on a problem, somehow their priorities start shifting,
Mm.
and all of a sudden the priority of the problem that they're trying to solve with you goes to the bottom of the pile, and that's sort of when you've lost it. You could have solved the issue for them, but you took so long that it just didn't happen,
Mm. Yeah.
or someone else fixed it for you, like you said in the intro. It could also very well be that someone else was a bit quicker, and just made it easy for them to solve the problem at their pace, and you lost out.
Yeah, it's very much a strategic approach, isn't it? It's almost
Mm-hmm.
starting with the end in mind and thinking, right, this is in an ideal world, this is how I would lead a client through the sales process, the client journey, my pipeline, like however people want to define it. But if you haven't even thought through what that process would be, well, that's first of all, I would suggest the first thing you do, even before you even start looking at systems like you guys. Do you find a lot of people that will either come to you or start having conversations with you, and then some of your guys, they will ask the question, okay, so tell me about your sales process, and it's a little bit all over the place. And so you almost have to be part of that education to sort of go, right, well, first
Mm-hmm.
of all, before you even think about this, you need to think about your process, because you can't systemize something that isn't process led. Do you find that is
Yeah.
quite a common thing?
What we do have in our software is a sort of standard sales process, on which you can map most. So it starts from having a lead, contacting that lead, then qualifying that lead to see whether it's a lead that you can sell to, making a proposal, and then either the lead is won or lost. That's what we offer standard, that people can start with if they don't have an idea. And something is obviously better than nothing when it comes to a sales process.
Mm.
But if you don't start adapting that sales process to the actual buying process that your customers are expecting, then you will start leaving a lot of money on the table as well, because you'll start trying to force them through steps that don't make any sense to them. And that's not what sales is about. Sales is about really guiding people from having a problem and wanting a solution to the right solution, um, in a way that they see themselves deciding on it as well.
Mm.
So it's very important. And it's actually, if you sign up for our software in the setup guide, it's one of the steps: configure your pipeline, that we ask people to do, to configure it to your needs. And we also have a few blog posts about how to do that and all that. So.
Mm. So, I mean, I've sort of teased a little bit there as well in the introduction around one of your clients that, or a number of your clients that have seen a massive impact in their business just by getting this bit right. And some of them
Mm-hmm.
are making well in excess of $1 million, whatever currency you're listening to this in. You can change it and think about just the impact it would have on your business just by following up more efficiently. So, are you able to give us an idea of kind of the before and then the after of what their situation looked like, or just one of them, or in general, and what they were able to do, and then how, obviously, I've kind of given away the punchline at the end with the improvement of the
Yeah.
revenue, but yeah, how did it, not necessarily just from a results and revenue point of view, but how does their business look like? What do their processes look like? How much easier is it for them in order to do that, having gone through using what you guys offer?
Yeah. So the regular customer either comes from something like Excel, actually mostly Excel or Google Sheets, or from some CRM that they weren't really using, sort of the two possibilities. In case of Sheets, mostly they either go away from the founders doing the sales, and they hire a first salesperson, and they want to be able to coach that person, have a bit of oversight and those kind of things. But it also happens often that it's a team that has been using Sheets for a while, and start seeing that a lot of these leads are dropping, because the Sheets don't really make it very easy to do the follow-up. And in the case that people were using a CRM that was too cumbersome, the same thing happens, because if you don't do the data input in a CRM, you don't have the data there, and the whole system fails. And it's very easy to make it fail, because even if you have, let's say, 50% filled out, it's not enough. You need to have 100% filled out if you want to do proper follow-up. So at that point, people start looking for solutions. They come to us if they look well enough, at least. And then what they start doing is importing that data over to our CRM. We start importing a lot of things with it. So their whole email and meeting timelines and contacts and all that starts automatically be populated. Then people, like we discussed, build in their sales process in Salesflare. Some of them don't know what sales process is, but if they come from somewhere else, they at least had something already. And the end result is easier collaboration. It's better follow-up. Actually, when I ask salespeople, so like the end users, what they're using Salesflare for, the answer is always to follow up leads better. While if I ask management, it will be things like for the salespeople to follow up leads better, obviously, or it is something like accountability and transparency and having a better oversight. And I did customer interviews actually in December, and one of our customers, it's a company in Southeast Asia that makes software. They told me that they follow up quite a lot better now, which makes that they, like you said, save or win. It depends the way you look at it. $1 million per year. And then actually, it was in March, I think, when the pandemic came along. They got on the chat really early, just beginning of lockdown, and they said, we need to start saving money because of COVID and all. We're going to cancel our plan. So I get back to them and I say, so you're like saving $1 million and you are paying us 105 a month because you have 3 users. That's 3 times 35. Do you think that is a good idea? So
It's not good maths, is it?
they sort of came back on that idea and said, yeah, maybe not. No, oh, we can keep this license. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's natural, isn't it? In the circumstances that we've had, it's never happened before, and naturally we're all looking at, right, what can we cut and all the rest of it. But sometimes when you really look, but you have to look into things and actually go, well, where is the biggest return for all of the investment that I'm getting? And that is why I talk about that sales opportunity cost being the fastest route to cash flow, because it tends to be that sitting in a lot of companies, and I find this a lot as well, just within your past leads, your past clients, your prospects that you've had that hasn't sort of converted or it's gone cold, you generally have a pretty you have a large chunk of cash flow sitting there and you don't even realize. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if you're able to organize that and keep on top of it, you will realize that over time as well. But one of the first things that you can do is literally go, okay, I need to bring in some cash flow to the company. Well, rather than think, right, I'm going to go invest a load of money in something, Facebook ads or some form of marketing or the rest of it, start with what you've got because you've worked hard to get them. So go back
Yeah.
and either just re-engage them, ask a question, hey, did you ever solve this problem? Like very simple. Or make an offer that is relevant to, hey, you inquired about this and blah blah blah. Obviously, you just wanted to know that we're still here and we have just improved our service by by adding X, Y, and Z. Would you like a conversation about it? And you will
Mm-hmm.
find that people will go, oh, okay, let's have that conversation, because that's all you're trying to do. It's keep the conversation going. Like ultimately with
Yeah.
follow up, that's how I look at it. It's keeping a conversation going, because we've all been at those events, parties, whatever you want to go to, and you meet someone new, and then you sort of get to a point in a conversation where it's kind of just died, and you then go, okay, nice to meet you, and then you wander off, and you might not see them again. Whereas the great conversations, the people that you meet and you are just hitting it off and hitting it off and hitting it off, and you continue that conversation by asking great questions, following up with interest about that person, but then leading a conversation in a particular way. And those are the people that you sort of come back from an event or party or whatever, and you're like, I met this awesome person. They
Mm-hmm.
remember you. And that's kind of what you're doing with this follow-up. And I
Definitely.
guess
Yeah,
it's even, yeah.
you're building a relationship by keeping the conversation going. I think to some extent it's just keeping the conversation going, especially if they're not ready to buy at that point or something. Another part of it is trying to solve their issue in the right timely way. It's two things I definitely believe in. What is the main challenge there, is doing that at scale, because if you only have one lead, it's not very hard. You can remember to, it's like calling your best friend or whatever. That's not too hard. But if you have like over 10, 20 going at the same time, then it starts becoming complicated, and that's why you need to build a system,
Yeah.
or get a system, so that you can start still deliver that sort of one-on-one follow-up feeling where it's like you're not treated as a number as a prospect, but this happens at scale, and that's a hard thing. We're not built for that as humans, for doing that. So that's why you need to find a solution for that.
Yeah, and what I love about sort of some of the things that you've said about what you guys have built there is it's like reminders, like it's almost like an artificial intelligence that reminds you to do certain things. It's like having a personal assistant or a secretary sort of sitting next to you and reminding you, right, okay, I've looked at everything that came in, last week or this week or whatever it is, and it's sort of like, okay, it's been 3 days, remember to do this, or it's like that. To me, I mean, we had the conversation about the vital nature of building systems in my business, just to remind myself to do things, to follow up, to do things. And I use them in my life. I mean, my watch buzzes all the time. I have my phone buzzes with reminders, with certain things that just remind me to
Mm-hmm.
do things, because otherwise I forget, because it's impossible to keep everything in your head. So I love the way that it doesn't just sort of like organize it, but it actively helps to trigger things that you need to do to follow up. And
Yeah.
that in itself is huge.
To your point, by the way, lots of companies also get an assistant to fill out the CRM. They don't just have an assistant to help with the follow-up. It's actually the salesperson does not do the inputs. So there's an assistant actively doing that. And I didn't know that this existed before we started this, but this happens all the time.
Mm.
And sometimes they even still keep doing it when they get on Salesflare, and then I need to say, like, this is not the way things should happen. I mean, the system already does so much. It's to help the salesperson and not to be some sort of database that an assistant needs to keep up to date.
Yeah, I mean, I can recall managing CRM systems and putting CRM systems into companies I've worked in and all the rest of it. And the number one thing that salespeople always complain about is having to do my own CRM, having to put my own data, having to manage my data, all that kind of thing, because salespeople want to sell. Like, that's what they want to do. They want to make commissions. Let them do that. Don't let things like admin and data input take up a chunk of their time, because I read a statistic the other day. It's like salespeople only spend 86% of their time doing things other than than sales. That's
Definitely.
insane. Like, that is insane. Like, a tiny amount of time actually spent doing the activity that they're employed to do, and that actually actively generates revenue or drives revenue in a business. 86% of their time they're doing other things, and I'm sure not all of it is Facebook or Twitter or whatever. A lot of it is just the stuff that you need to do, and especially if you're in a company that's running sheets, for example, like you referenced at the beginning, it's so much time wasted. And just think, that in itself is an opportunity cost that is hidden in your business, because if you can remove that, all of that time is freed up. That could be hours and hours and hours and hours a month, a year. How much
Yeah.
time is that worth if your salespeople are out doing the thing that they need to be doing?
Yeah, and it's not just filling out the CRM. There's so many things where with software you can start making a difference. There's so many stupid like routine tasks that are really administrative things that a computer can do much better. It's like, for instance, booking meetings. Just use a meeting scheduler. There's no need to be afraid of doing that anymore, and everybody knows that. So you just say you can find a good moment to talk on this link. People click on it, they can choose a moment that fits well in their calendar. Done. You don't need to send 10 emails back and forth. There's things like repetitive emails that you can start using email templates for. So you don't need to type the whole thing every time. You can track emails. So you know at least whether people have opened and clicked. So that information makes that you can make a better decision of whether to follow up and when and all that, instead of just shooting in the dark. There's voice over IP solutions that make it much easier to, for instance, if you're in Salesflare and you click on a phone number, that it can trigger that and just quickly call from there. Everywhere there's all this kind of small improvements you can make, which makes that you can spend so much more time actually doing things that you're supposed to do as a salesperson, which is really connecting with customers, because that's what you're hired for. And mostly what salespeople are good at. Salespeople are not necessarily good at IT stuff in most cases, rather slow at it. There's exceptions, obviously, but mostly salespeople are people that like to interact with other humans. So they should be able to focus their time there instead of on software things.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, it just sort of makes me think, and it's come up a few times with a few other guests on this podcast. It's not looking at this and thinking I have to have the whole thing working straight away. It's making small incremental improvements and doing that sort of over time. So it's getting the bare bones, let's say, your system, having that in there, getting the minimal viable version of that working, so that you're automating certain things, you've got your calendar set up, all that kind of thing. You've got your process dialed in, but then it's, what are the incremental improvements that I can be doing on a weekly basis that would just make that 1% improvement in productivity, time saving, following up, whatever that ends up being. But that 1% every day or every week, it adds up in multiple different areas to a huge, it's like an exponential improvement in terms of what you get out of it at the end. But I often find, having sort of implemented these various types, and Salesforce is one that I've done way back, and all that kind of stuff, it's like people want the whole thing just ready to go.
Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah.
you have to kind of understand how to use it, make sure the people that are using it in the best way before you just load everything on them and expect them to be perfect. It doesn't work like that with anything new. You've got to kind of build the habits as well. As automated as it can be, there is still habits that you need to form. So that's why I think that I found that that's one of the biggest mistakes. I'm not sure if that matches how you've seen things,
No,
but
I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of people that try to all of a sudden, like, they decide there needs to be a change. For instance, there's a new VP of sales or something, and they want to just rebuild everything, and they see everything as one huge project, and they're just going to deliver it like that to the sales team, and then the sales team is just going to absorb it, and it's all going to be solved, and it just doesn't work that way. um, First of all, you often make huge mistakes when doing that. It doesn't work for the sales team because they like you said, they need to change habits over time. And the third thing is that if you work like that, you don't build in this sort of habit of continuous improvement, which we believe is very important. As a company, we even have a thing called habits, where we have certain types of improvements defined, that we do every month, so that we keep putting in that consistent effort towards building more value for our customers and growing as a company. And I believe as a business and as a person, this is much more important than doing this kind of one-off big change. It's trying to find these places all the time where you can do better, where you're doing routine stuff and can automate them, where there are certain bottlenecks for your customers, finding these things over and over again, that, like you said, then will sort of result in this exponential improvement. This is, yeah, there's often people say 1% every day, and then they do to the power of 365, and then you get this huge number. Uh,
yeah, and it won't work like that every single time. But the concept is sound, because it's
mhm.
those small improvements each and every time. And I'm sure, if I was to ask you about when you first started, as into today, like you as a person and your business will look very, very different, I'm sure. I mean, sort of thinking about that, I mean, what do you think in terms of the business and yourself? Like, what has been some of the biggest changes that you've seen happen from when you started to where you are now, in terms of the learning, the understanding, and maybe some of the ways you've gone about growing the business?
um, so many things. I'll start selecting. Our software definitely went from, to give you an idea of that, it started from a plugin that would show you next to your emails what sort of the timeline was with each customer. It made it very easy for you to create a new customer next to your emails. That's still something that exists, but Salesforce has become so much more. At some point, people were like, yeah, we get the idea of a plugin and we like it, but where's that app thing? And things just grow from there. So you start with a very much of a core idea, and people always bring you new things, and you start to sort of visualize the road ahead, even though you have a vision of where to go. The road is something that you need to define together with customers, because otherwise it's just you start building something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, there's before you go on, because I want to sort of pick up on that, because I love that you gave that as one of your first answers thinking about it, because I find that the biggest, or one of the biggest reasons why people struggle with their marketing, or by growing a business or anything, it's basically because there is a complete failure to actually listen to your market, your client, and actually listen to what they are telling you, because you can get so attached to your thing, your product,
mhm,
and you are not listening, like, to your client, your client or your customer, and they're telling you that we want this different, we want something else. Like, if you hadn't have listened to your customers, you'd have carried on with a plugin, and who knows whether you'd still be here or not, right?
mhm.
You have to be able to listen to your client, and then, I guess, adapt and change based on what that feedback is, and constantly, because at the end of the day, without your clients, you do not have a business. So why would you not but some people are so attached to their idea and the thing and all the rest of it, and they're just like, no, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. Whereas, and you mentioned it earlier as well, and I definitely picked it up that you are a client-led business, and I can tell that because you even mentioned earlier around I had client interviews, like feedback interviews and stuff like that. So that's something I'm guessing that you have built into your follow-up with your clients, because a lot of people don't necessarily think about that. They think the follow-up is what you do to get the sale. But what about the follow-up afterwards? Like, what do you do after the sale to talk to your clients, to make sure that they're happy, to carry on giving a great service, all that kind of thing? There's so much more that it can do and generate for you, because referrals, all that kind of thing, recommendations, they exist or they happen because people feel valued by you and they think that what you can give another person is valuable and it will make them look good. Like all that, yeah. And yeah, that was something that stood out for me there with what you said. And thinking, has things changed then in your business in terms of how you've generated business to how you generate business today? Getting your first clients, for example, was that different to how you do that today?
Totally different, yeah. Yeah, we started off with a very sales-heavy sort of process, where I would do business development, I would do demos, I would put people on the software. That means even connecting their email account. It was pretty hard in the beginning when we started Salesforce, and now it's very easy. Now you just go on the software, Google, and it works. But it didn't work that way in the past. I would then help them in the setup. Like, okay, we're going to set up your pipeline, or the sales process. Look, do you want some custom fields? Look, you can make custom fields. These custom fields have kind of different types. I would do literally everything, follow up with them. That is something that gradually we started taking away different parts of the process, where today, in some cases, I'm still getting on a call, and this is something that my colleague Taylor will soon take over, but to sort of see what their specific case is, to then think along with them. But all the other things are automated. So we get a consistent stream of leads. I don't need to go do business development. They just connect their email address. They get on the software. They get a sort of walkthrough automated. Then after that, they get a setup guide. The setup guide tells them what the steps are that they should take. And you actually get extra trial days when you go through these steps. So it sort of motivates people as well. There's always a little article and a video. So it's also explained if that helps. You go through the steps. Then we start automatically following up with you. The first message might be automated because we are not robots who look at every new customer and then look at all the data and then start sending messages. It's like at the right time, there's sort of trigger and it says like, hey, are you finding all the features? Can we help? Things like that. And then obviously the conversation is there. So we can help you with things you find. We'll ask you feedback. I'll automatically connect with you on Facebook. Also ask you for feedback. How are the first impressions? I ask to everyone. And then we get to know you as a customer and get you through the process. But it's so different from early stages. Now, I'm not saying that the early stages were wrong. It was perfect for then. Then we didn't have a lot of leads, which means we needed a much higher close ratio. So that was one of the reasons to do a full process. They would never have gotten through the process if it were self-guided. No one, I think. So that's a good reason as well.
And I can also imagine that it's helped you create that process, that automated process, as you've got it now. Because, I mean, without going through that would have been so hard to create because you wouldn't have ironed out all the kinks or heard how people are reacting. And that itself is another great example of the power of follow-up. Because I think, as we said, it's not just about making the sale, or it's not just about reminding, hey, did you see my email? Did you get my quote? All that kind of thing. It is a follow-up process that continually makes sure that what you're delivering to somebody is actually doing what they expected it to do, first off. And then second of all, it is what they have got actually solving the problem that they need solved.
Yeah,
and doing it in a way that they like. So there's so much. I find follow-up is such a huge subject, but it's also one that is it's so misunderstood within what you can do with it. I mean, follow-up, maybe we shouldn't call it follow-up, call it something else, but the whole onboarding process, the aftercare, like that's all a follow-up, but we don't think about that. Like that
I don't know what we should call it. I think follow-up is the only word we have in English. But indeed, follow-up. It sounds like you're sending a follow-up email or something, which is not what it is. It's really guiding people through the process, understanding them, handing them the right solutions, making sure that the way it's set up for them is slightly different than for the other person. Getting them through the little difficult moments, like a data import, for instance. It often is a bit more complicated. You need to clean up your data a bit before you put things in, because otherwise weird stuff happens. That's all follow-up.
Yeah, and the amount of money left on the table by not doing it well. Like you can just hit, like there's so many points of failure along that path that if you don't understand, first of all, the strategy that you're going to be following in that, not just from the pipeline, but then afterwards, onboarding, just think, what are you trying to do? Is it increase revenue? Is it reduce time spent on certain tasks? Because that in itself improves profitability, because you can have people doing more things or different things that are higher ROI driven, that kind of thing. And really, before I would suggest thinking about, right, okay, what am I going to do with my follow-up? It's like, what do you want your entire client journey to look like? Like, can you explain from start to finish? And I don't mean nobody's ever heard of you and then buys something. It's how do you get somebody's attention? How do you engage them? What happens during that process? How do you get them to put up their hand? How do you get them to either request information to the point where they want to have a conversation? And then what do you do in that follow-up process to keep them informed? Blah, 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 blah. How do you make the sale? What is that process? How is that follow-up managed? And then what happens when somebody says, yes, I'm going to be a client, signs on the dotted line, makes the payment? What immediately happens after that? And then how do you guide somebody through that process? And what happens then when they've reached a point where maybe they're not necessarily using you anymore because you've solved their problem, but then other things that will happen after that? If you cannot say what that process is all the way through from a strategic point of view, that's the first thing you should do, I think.
Yeah.
Because,
but rather from a high level, I would say don't make it too complicated at the start. Just map out the process in a rough way, and then start doing the process. Go through it manually, see where there's some embarrassing moments in the process, where it doesn't really fit customers. Listen to customers, what they actually want, and then you can start improving on that. It's this continuous improvement that we were talking about earlier. And after a while, after going through it many times, you will understand better and better how customers actually would like it to go, and it will seem seamless. It will seem like you've made this perfect process out of nowhere, but actually it's a long work. It's like that in many fields. It's the practice that makes perfect in the end.
Yeah, it is. And I do think I was fortunate enough this weekend to go and play a round of golf for the first time since this whole lockdown thing happened and all the rest of it. It just makes me think. It's like you look at some people that play golf and you look at them that you think they've got the perfect golf swing. Right? I walk onto a course after 6 months and think, right, I've watched a few YouTube videos and I've watched a bit of the majors and all the rest of it. I'll just turn up and whack it like Rory McIlroy. It did not happen. Like, it does not happen, because the golf swing, while it looks like one big fluid movement, it's made up of very a lot of small intricate sort of movements. And yet there was me trying to just try and whack the bloody ball. If you're able to think, right, what is the most minimal viable way I'm going to get this ball off the ground and nearer to the hole than, where I started? I'm going to start with that because I haven't played for 6 months. And
Mm-hmm.
then maybe I can go and practice and add little bits and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, I didn't start like that. But it's the same sort of analogy, I think, when it comes to really anything in business. Like, you're not going to suddenly
Mm-hmm.
get up there and drive a ball like Tiger Woods, right? You're not going to suddenly have this all singing, all dancing, beautiful process and system when you've not had anything like that done before. So start with the basics. What is your, I'm going to butcher my golf analogy now, but what's your stance look like? What's your setup? How do you do the first bit you take away? All that kind of thing. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, just work on those little bits first. What are the basics, the fundamentals? You can see here, like I've got the Morzing poster, and I used to teach snowboarding, and I
Yeah.
back in my day, and it always was the same thing. It came down to the fundamentals. The stance and the balance was a thing that was 95% of the time wrong with people. They stood on it wrong, and it's like they just want to know how to do, the complicated stuff and all the rest of it. It's
Yeah.
like, right, okay, you need to adjust your stance. You need to stop leaning back, because it's like riding a bike, and if you lift the front wheel off, you've got no steering. So that's what you need to
Mm-hmm.
do. Start getting, more centered, all that kind of thing. It's the same thing. And I'm going off on one of my tangents, but I'm such a big believer. And if you just get the foundational pieces right, then you can build on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly the same with, like a system like yours. You've done a lot of the blooming hard work, right? Because you give people the foundation. Like, that
Yeah.
is the foundation. So it's then about understanding how to use that foundation in the correct way. And so I think that gives me a great sort of segue into sort of saying, right, where would somebody go to take a look at the software that you have created? And is there something there that you can take a look at and try it out, anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. It's easy. It's just our website, which is salesflare.com, and Flare is, in case you're wondering, FLARE, like a flare.
Yeah.
Um, and at the top right, there's a button. I think it says free CRM trial. Like I said, it's a sort of variable length trial. So it starts with 7 days. But as you set up the software, you can get to 30. And if you invite team members, even more. And during that time, you can freely start using the software. And then as the trial ends, you just subscribe and can keep using it.
Yeah. And just hearing some of the things that you have put into your follow-up system or your onboarding system,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a good education to go through it, I would suggest, and think about, is there things that I can learn from somebody or a company that has invested a lot of money into understanding and sees a lot of other companies doing similar things? What can I learn from the way that they do this? What trigger points are that can I see that they're using with me? Like the whole thing about gamifying things, like that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you gamify your follow-up? I don't know. It's just little things like that you can pick up from other people, and by learning and seeing what they do is almost as valuable as sort of listening and listening to the teachings, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well. From you personally, is there a place you like to connect with people if they have questions, for example?
Like I said, I connect with everyone who gets on the software. At least I try to on LinkedIn.
Cool.
If you want to connect, LinkedIn is the best place, but with a message. So I know you come from the Client Catching podcast, and it's not some random person who wants to sell me another thing.
Because we
That's
all get those.
helpful. Yeah.
Well, thank you ever so much for joining me. It's been a really interesting conversation. And for me, I think this is one of the things that, if people can really sort of like understand, especially if they've been in business for a while, like if you're brand new listening to this, you don't have that sort of build up in, over time of things that you've got in your business and the network and the prospects and all that kind of thing. But if you have been going for a while, there is probably gold sitting right there, and you just have to reach out and take it. And this is
Definitely.
a way that you can organize that process. And yeah, maybe you've got $1 million sitting there and you just don't realize. So thank you ever so much, Jeroen. Thank you for coming and joining and sharing me with your knowledge and your wisdom, and what you guys have built. And all that's left to say is happy fishing.
Thank you. I had fun.